Hello, my name is Andrew Brooks. This presentation is entitled Vacuum Potential Theory, a New Framework by myself, 2018 chariotoflife.com. This is somewhat unique. Most of the presentations, actually all the presentations I've done on YouTube are non-linear existentialism, which is a theoretical explanation or a potential explanation for the human mind, the brain, intelligence, and how it came to be and what it is actually, from mostly a biological point of view, interspersed with philosophy and other different studies in order to give it more meaning or understanding. This one, this is slightly different, actually quite a bit different. This is in the realm of theoretical physics. And the reason why is that during the production, inquiry of nonlinear existentialism, there was always a background ideas of probability and how it occurred and how I proposed it occurred and how it applied to the theory of nonlinear existentialism. But at the same time doing that reading about the research on such an event as it applied in regular circumstances, it seemed that there was more and more that it could be linked to the study of theoretical physics. So given that, and given that I've basically finished my overview of nonlinear existentialism and the other presentations on YouTube, that I thought it would be a good idea to just do a brief overview of the vacuum potential theory, which is kind of an extension of that came to be because of considering the aspects that could be linked to theoretical physics as it relates to nonlinear existentialism. So for this one, for table of contents, we have the initial inquiry. We have the premise, there is only one. Components within this framework, overview of it, and given this framework, the kind of conclusions I can make. So the question I had for myself, does an unknown interference always lead to uncertainty? As it was speculated in nonlinear existentialism, the interference that was created in layer V1b of the cerebral cortex was supposed to produce frequency modulation as well as amplitude modulation, leading to the behaviors and the abilities of the human mind. So in this way, I was asking myself, in the bigger scheme of things, i.e. reality, i.e. theoretical physics and how it applies to our reality, can this also be considered? Because of the field of quantum mechanics, the famous phrase, does God roll dice? At the level subatomic, atomic, subatomic, and the deeper we go, it appears that everything is based on probability. So I asked myself, could this probability be occurring? Because not only with the Heisenberg idea that the events of persons, the tools that are used to try to measure something causes something to occur, so you can't actually measure another aspect of that's interference, but maybe perhaps that there is a fundamental interference that's causing things to be understood in quantum mechanics through probability equations. So based on this, I did some research and basically threw out everything I thought I knew about how the universe is believed to occur. So I said to myself, the initial singularity was not the beginning of the known universe. So what I was suggesting to myself, why not go, predate that, as it were. So what I did is, after thinking about it for a long time, I came up with, I didn't use the traditional, I guess, labels, appellations that are used for subatomic, atomic particles, because I didn't want to get waylaid with that. So I just came up with a series of other titles that I think would just make it easier just to concentrate more on the interactions and the basic premise and how it would be carried forward, as opposed to being caught up with what is currently considered for these subatomic atomic particles and other ones that are coming up through the research that's occurring in Europe. So these are just going to be the kind of the acronyms for the materials, the theoretical particles, theoretical conditions that I'm considering. So you can use this, go back to it as just as a reference. So the overview. Initially, there was an absolute non-state, which could be assigned infinitely small but positive probability of becoming a state. This is kind of the idea of the quantum theory, Heisenberg and such, where, and Niels Bohr, of course, the idea that at this level, at the subatomic level, everything is considered in a probability state. But then I asked myself, does it say anywhere that if you have an absolute non-state, a non-state being something that can be measured in any fashion, could it become something? Could non-state become a state? And in quantum mechanics and in the probability, the study of probability at this in this field, basically, no, you can actually say anything can occur from something else or from nothing actually, as long as enough time is given. So a non-state can actually lead to a state, even though there's an infinitesimal probability of occurring. But if you've got an infinite amount of time or non-time, it can occur. So this is where number 2 comes in. When the infinitely small probability did occur, the non-state became a state. The simplest way to describe this event is as follows. 0 being the absolute non-state, that non-existence becomes -1 plus 1. Basically what this is saying is that in entropy and such, it doesn't allow for the equation to be equivalent back and forth, but in this way I don't think entropy does apply. So basically -1 plus 1 is equal to 0 and 0 is equal to -1 plus 1. With -1 and 1 describing similar and equal but opposing states, each state consisting of an enormous group set of entities. So interesting enough. So number 3, together the states of -1 and 1 can result in an infinite number of configurations ranging from completely filled to completely empty. So the idea is that you can have the state being one enormous, without end, basically solid state, or one that's completely empty. So all configurations can occur, as quantum mechanics and quantum theory says is allowed, with the only requirements being -1 must be equal to 1. That's overall, but localized. However, this does not allow this does allow -1 to equal to 1 locally. So while overall -1 equals to 1, in some areas there can be inconsistencies, incongruencies, if it were, that allows for inequalities to occur. So the resultant matter is either attached, strings, superstrings, loops, or unattached, either in isolation or in groups. What this is basically saying is that, think of it as a web. I would say that because all situations can occur, I'm talking about a situation, local situation, that allows for there being attached and unattached matter. So you can basically think of, I didn't do any pictures on this one because I really had the people sit back and consider the theory. Pictures, I think, sometimes makes it easy on an individual to go, oh yeah, I see what them, but I think really in order to grasp this, you got to sit back and just consider it for yourself. And the way I look at it is a web. You got a web, very, very thin. The matter is basically pulled out and attached. That's why we get the strings, superstrings, and loops. Depends on where within the grouping, the field that is being considered or attended to. It's the same idea when you have the photoelectric effect, where you can have it as either a wave, or you can have it as particles, or you can have both. That's what Albert Einstein, in his photoelectric paper, basically came to. It depends on what perspective, what reference. So in this way, the attached matter can appear to be strings, superstrings, or loops. Depends on what reference or what experiment is being, or what the reference point is. And unattached is basically going to be particles or pieces of matter that are not attached to these strings, superstrings. Yeah, and the thing is, they can either be in isolation or in groups. So you can have packets of these strings, superstrings, or loops, or you can have them in isolation or in groups. That's going to be either the strings, superstrings, or loops, the attached or the unattached. So if the system was at rest, none of the matter or their connections would affect each other. Basically, what this is saying is that it would be balanced, and everything would be at rest. However, given the way the universe is right now, and given that I'm actually giving this presentation, number 7 is more likely the situation within this theoretical framework that is occurring. So if the system was in motion dynamic, then the moments can affect each other. So continuing, due to a localized heterogeneity, it could be suggested that some of the attached matter could affect other attached matter via their connections to each other. So just think of the web, that there's going to be a particle piece, some type of uniqueness that is causing a part of that web to be drawn towards one central point. It could be further suggested this could result in the formation of localized groups. So the thing is that as more and more is being brought more and more to this centralized area, that you get a localized group. As the localized group become larger, -1 and 1 sets of UMs and AMs may come together, producing an unstable localized group, and even a highly unstable localized group. So the thing is that black holes, as we understand it in this framework, would actually be the material going towards, instead of expanding, it would be retracting towards this one point, because there's so much unstable localized group attached matter that is accumulating in this one area. So you basically have everything being drawn towards it. So on the other side of it, number 11, the instability created by the interaction of localized -1 and 1 sets in localized areas could be so great that it creates an expanding non-localized event, ENE, or a Big Bang. So one area you're going to have a contraction, which is going to be, well, gathering at one point, which is going to be the black hole, and then the other one, the expansion, is going to be the Big Bang. And again, this is localized. And then it goes into non-localized, because for a non-localized event, it's going out, whereas for a Big Bang, for the black hole, it's going towards one localized area. As the affected material within the expanding non-localized event moves outward, a pan-directional dispersion is creating, affecting all matter and moves through, most of which would be the unattached matter. So this is very important. So we'll go through why it's very important, or I believe it's very important. All matter in the universe was not in the initial singularity that created the Big Bang. From my understanding, more and more people are coming to realize that the initial idea, the initial singularity being the creating event for everything expanding into basically nothingness, perhaps is not the correct, not for the idea that they believe in this framework or they're aware of this framework, is that the expansion appears to be continually onwards. So if you've got this event, the initial singularity expanding outwards, tremendous heat, density, and everything else, is that you would think that after a while, billions and billions of years, the expansion would slow down. However, the expansion, from my understanding, is not slowing down. And in this framework I'm giving, this theory I'm giving, it would make sense, because we have the attached matter is still attached, and it's moving from one area to another area, as with rubber bands, as if we have a web. So the thing is, these attachments and such, and the dynamic nature of these attachments would make sense that it would still be expanding. And presently, from my understanding, also there's not enough matter as it presently is understood within the known universe, within the current theories, would not allow this to occur. In the theory that I'm presenting, this framework I'm presenting, it would naturally occur. So as such, energy emitted by the UM is a byproduct of the UM interacting with the disturbance of the underlying AM. So what this is basically saying is you got the attached and unattached matter interact with each other. The attached matter is basically moving, as I'll discuss later, at the speed of light through the unattached matter. And this is what's giving the energy to the unattached matter, because this has always kind of bothered me, as whenever at my understanding of physics, is that it's kind of applying that infinitesimal amounts of material have basically infinite amount of power, because if they're continually to express themselves constantly in a certain way, that means that not only is the energy within this unattached matter, matter as we know it, basically continually, it's infinite basically, but also it's being let out, given out at a specific rate, which I find is extremely hard to believe. So in this way is that the unattached matter is basically inactive and is being activated by a constant that's moving through it. Something to consider. Number 3, not only does the energy within the expanding non-localized event affect the UM it passes through, but groups of UM can affect the AM, disturbing the AM carrying the disturbance. So this is the idea of gravity. Of course, this could be implying that I'm suggesting a solution to the unified field theory. I could be. You never know. So the idea in this one is that the more groups of unattached material is occurring, it can be in groups, and the more it will affect the AM which is passing through it. And the more UM is in groups is occurring, the more effect is. So a sun, any large object, can actually start to bend light, because as I've mentioned and will mention later on, is that what we see for the idea of speed of light as a carrier, is kind of an expression of the underlying expanding attached material. So, because the attached nature of the AM, the disturbance not only moves away but toward other areas within the endless field in ways completely independent of the UM. This is very important right now. As such, at the atomic subatomic level, this interaction creates regular motion in the UM that is unpredictable. So the thing is that things appear to be constant, have certain unique characteristics, as I mentioned before, and the energy is not per se from the object, but the object interacting with this underlying field that's moving through it at the speed of light, as a remnant of the E and E. So the thing is that also, because it's moving through it and moving through it dynamically, not in just one direction, but because the field underneath it is so dynamic, the disturbance is moving out, and we're basically moving relative to it, if I can use this term. So at this relative, because it's moving through us at this present time in the expanding universe, it has slowed down or reached basically a uniform rate of velocity through the material. So it's giving everything kind of that interaction back and forth is kind of uniform at the present time. So it gives regular motion to the UM that is unpredictable. Sorry, because as I mentioned, the attached material is moving around within us because of the dynamic field that it is moving within. So it's basically like let's just say if we're going to go two-dimensional, the surface of a lake, but let's say that there's a lot of things and that the wave is moving up, but a lot of things that is actually disturbing the water, pulling it this way, pulling it that way. So even though something that's moving within the wave that's moving over and over and over through an object, it's causing the object to be agitated, but not just in one direction, because the wave itself on the water is moving around so much that it gives the idea that there's no directionality per se to the disturbance moving through it, but there actually is. Because everything is relative to the velocity of the disturbance, nothing is able to move quicker than it, the idea of the speed of light. Again, this is kind of the end idea that this is uniform at present. I myself don't believe that the speed of light is going to always be uniform. It's going to change because, again, the underlying dynamic AM is in itself adjusting itself, moving within other things that are adjusting it. So that in itself allows for the material to be excited and express its characteristics based on its unique characteristics of it if itself as a substance. However, it's unpredictable. But the the primary force, that which causes everything to be in motion, is in itself changing somewhat. But because our awareness of it and our measurement of it and such has only occurred over the last 100 years or less, we have of the understanding that it is constant, but I suspect over a period of time that this will not be true. These are a lot of things to consider, to digest, to think. However, I just think it's an important framework to consider, and I think in some ways it does give a unique way of looking at things. But I really need to stress the idea is that the two huge things of this theory is that there was something, well, theoretically, there was a non-state before the Big Bang. And when the Big Bang occurred, it wasn't into empty space. The nature of reality is quite attached. There is a disturbance which is continually to occur, which allows us to exist in our present form. And I think there is an argument to be made, of course, one may not believe the framework, that there is some uniformity, there is some ability to grasp how gravitation can be related to electromagnetic effects. This, of course, is not a mathematical presentation in the least, but I think that before one tries to apply math, that there needs to be a model to be understood, and then once it's worked out to a reasonable extent, then say, well, can math be applied that to allow for some predictability? But I thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. You take care. Goodbye.